The evening had started like 1,000 others, polished silver, white candles, soft jazz floating through the air. From the outside, the Whittaker mansion looked like the picture of success. Inside, it felt like a battlefield disguised as dinner. Rachel Monroe Whittaker sat at one end of the table, her posture perfect, her hands resting gently beside her plate. Her husband, Jordan, was at the other end, loud, charismatic, and entirely unaware of the storm he was about to unleash. It wasn't just a family dinner. It was a performance. Jordan's parents, his younger brother Elliot, and two of his business partners filled the seats between them, men who had built fortunes with him, or so they believed. Jordan lifted his wine glass, eyes glinting with that smug confidence that had once drawn Rachel to him, and now made her skin crawl. To success, he declared, and to the people who make it possible. Rachel smiled politely. Everyone clinked glasses. But Jordan wasn't done. He never was. "So, Rachel," he said, swirling his wine, "did you ever figure out that new marketing proposal I left on the counter? Or did it confuse you again?" The laughter came immediately, sharp, nervous, eager to please laughter. Rachel didn't join them. She simply folded her napkin in her lap and said quietly, "I figured it out years ago." Jordan smirked. "Cute." Elliot shifted uncomfortably. Their father sighed. Their mother whispered his name under her breath, but Jordan didn't stop. He never knew when to stop. "You know," he continued, "I don't mean to sound harsh, but not everyone's built for business. Some people just don't have the head for it." Rachel stared at him, calm as still water. "And yet, some people with a head for business still lose their soul." The table went silent. Jordan's smirk faltered. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she said softly. He leaned forward, voice low but sharp. "You think you're better than me, Rachel?" She met his gaze. "No, Jordan. I just think you forgot what better looks like." His pride couldn't take it. Not in front of his partners. Not in his own home. Jordan's jaw tightened. "You ungrateful." He pushed his chair back, the wood scraping the marble floor. Then, in one horrifying motion, he leaned forward, and spat on the table, right beside her plate. The sound was small, but it echoed like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Rachel blinked once. She didn't cry. Didn't shout. She simply stood up, her voice trembling only slightly. "Dinner's over," she whispered. And she left, the hem of her black dress brushing the floor, the door closing softly behind her. No one moved for a full minute. Then Jordan's father said quietly, "Son, you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Jordan's pride flared. She'll get over it. But deep down, a part of him already knew she wouldn't. Act 2, The Revelation. 3 mornings later, Jordan arrived at Whittaker Holdings expecting another day of control. But something felt off the moment he walked in. Employees avoided his eyes. The boardroom doors were already open. Inside, the entire executive team sat waiting. At the head of the table, in his chair, sat Rachel. He froze. "What the hell is this?" Rachel looked up, calm and composed in a gray tailored suit. "Good morning, Jordan. Please, take a seat." He scoffed. "You're in my chair." She gestured to the folder in front of her. "Not anymore." Jordan laughed, that same arrogant, dismissive laugh that had once charmed investors and disarmed competitors. "You're joking. Whatever this is, it's cute, but—" "Jordan," interrupted the CFO nervously, "perhaps you should take a look at these documents." She slid the folder toward him. Inside were signed certificates, notarized records, and one line that made his stomach twist. Majority ownership, Rachel Monroe Whittaker, 90%. His throat went dry. "What is this?" Rachel's voice remained steady. 5 years ago, during the merger, you transferred 90% of your shares to me under a trust. For tax reasons, you said. That was temporary. She nodded. You said you'd reverse it later. You never did. Jordan's voice cracked. You can't just. Rachel cut him off, her tone calm but ironclad. I can. And I have. Effective immediately, you're being placed on leave pending a full audit of company spending. The color drained from his face. You can't fire me. I'm not firing you, she said gently. I'm protecting what we built, from you. He slammed his fist on the table. You can't do this to me, Rachel. Finally, her composure wavered. Tears glistened in her eyes, not of pain, but of release. You did this to yourself. For a moment, he saw it, the years of quiet endurance, of her smiling through insults, holding their life together while he took all the credit. The nights she stayed up managing the numbers while he boasted about his genius. And now, she wasn't the quiet wife anymore. She was the majority owner. The woman who built the foundation beneath his empire. He looked around the table for support. But no one met his eyes. Rachel stood, her voice soft but final. You taught me to know my worth, Jordan. You just never thought I'd use that lesson. And with that, she walked out, leaving him to stare at the empty chair that was once his throne. Act 3, The Fall and the Rise. The mansion felt colder now. The laughter was gone. Jordan's reflection in the marble floors looked like a ghost. Days turned into weeks. He called her. She didn't answer. He sent letters, apologies, excuses, promises. All returned unopened. For the first time, Jordan Whittaker had to face himself, stripped of power, stripped of pride, left alone with silence. He spent nights replaying the dinner in his mind, hearing the echo of that one moment, the sound of spitting on the table, over and over, until it made him sick. Meanwhile, at the company, Rachel rebuilt everything. She met with employees, listened to their concerns, replaced fear with respect. The toxic culture Jordan had created began to fade. Under her leadership, profits rose. Investors trusted her. The press called her the woman who saved Whittaker Holdings. But she didn't smile for cameras. She didn't crave applause. Her victory wasn't about revenge, it was about restoration. One rainy afternoon, Jordan showed up at her office unannounced. He looked smaller, not in stature, but in spirit. Rachel, he said softly, I needed to see you. She looked up from her desk, surprised but composed. You shouldn't be here. I know, he said, voice shaking. But I couldn't leave things like this. I was cruel. And stupid. And I hurt the one person who deserved my respect the most. Rachel studied him for a long moment. The anger had long burned away, all that remained was truth. Why now? She asked. Because, he whispered, without you, I finally saw who I really am. And I don't like that man. Rachel nodded slowly. That's a start. He looked down. I don't expect forgiveness. She stood and walked to the window, her reflection shimmering beside his. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, Jordan. But growth, that's something else. He hesitated. So what now? She turned, her expression soft but firm. Now, you learn what it feels like to build something, not on control, but on respect. He nodded. For the first time, he truly understood. As he left the office, the rain outside slowed to a drizzle, the gray sky breaking open with faint sunlight, a small promise of redemption. Epilogue, thread of time narration. There are moments that redefine a life, moments that strip away power, pride, and illusion. For Jordan, it was a single act of disrespect that cost him everything. For Rachel, it was the courage to stand up, reclaim her worth, and rise without cruelty. We often measure power by control, by who speaks loudest or holds the most. But real power is quiet. It's the strength to walk away. The grace to rebuild without hate. The wisdom to remember that respect can't be bought, and dignity can't be taken. Because in the end, the ones who know their worth never need to prove it, they just rise, and let the world catch up. In the months that followed, the empire Jordan once ruled began to forget his name. The glossy magazines that once praised him as the face of modern leadership stopped calling. The investors who once cheered his ambition now avoided his number. And the employees, the very people he'd once dismissed, began to thrive under Rachel's leadership. He watched it all unfold from the sidelines, sitting alone in the guest house on the edge of the property he no longer controlled. He'd traded love for dominance, and ended up with neither. Every morning, he'd open his laptop to check the news. And every morning, there she was, Rachel Monroe Whitaker, smiling humbly beside her team, the headline reading: "Under new leadership, Whitaker Holdings reaches record growth." He couldn't bring himself to be angry. Not anymore. Just hollow. Sometimes, late at night, he'd drive past the office tower they'd built together. He'd park across the street and watch through the glass as light stayed on long past midnight, her light, always the last to go out. He used to think she stayed quiet because she was weak. Now he realized she'd been quiet because she was strong enough not to shout. Scene: Jordan's redemption attempt. One morning, after months of silence, Jordan did something he hadn't done in years. He showed up at a community center, the same one Rachel had quietly funded when no one was watching. It was filled with single mothers, job seekers, and young entrepreneurs. On the wall hung a plaque that read, "The Rachel Monroe Foundation, empowering the undervalued." He stood there, reading her name, the weight of irony pressing down like gravity. An older woman approached him. "You here for the workshop?" she asked. Jordan blinked. "Workshop?" "Yeah," she said, smiling. "Mrs. Whitaker started a mentorship program for folks trying to rebuild their lives. You look like you could use it." He almost laughed at the absurdity. Jordan Whitaker, the man who once lectured CEOs about success, being told he needed mentorship. But instead of leaving, he stayed. He listened to stories of struggle, of failure, of second chances. And for the first time, he didn't speak. He just listened. Scene: Rachel's perspective. That same afternoon, Rachel sat in her office overlooking the city skyline. Success felt different now. Quieter. Her assistant knocked softly. "Mrs. Whitaker. There's something you should see." She handed Rachel a photo, taken by a volunteer at the foundation earlier that day. There, in the background, sat Jordan, hair unkempt, eyes tired, but listening intently to a young man speaking about rebuilding after bankruptcy. Rachel stared at the image for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, "He finally found his mirror." Her assistant hesitated. "Do you want him removed from the program?" Rachel shook her head. "No. Leave him. Everyone deserves a chance to learn." Act V, the closure. Weeks passed. Jordan became a regular at the foundation. He arrived early, stayed late, helped set up chairs, listened to speakers, even volunteered to teach budgeting classes, not as an expert, but as a man who had learned humility the hard way. He didn't mention who he used to be. He didn't need to. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "I never thought I'd see you here." He turned. Rachel stood at the doorway, calm, radiant, almost unfamiliar in her peace. He stood quickly. "Rachel." "I." She raised a hand gently. "Don't explain. Just tell me, what have you learned?" He took a breath. That success built on pride collapses faster than failure built on honesty. That power means nothing if it costs you respect. And that I spent years trying to be a king, when I should have been a partner. Rachel's eyes softened. "That's something." He stepped closer, hesitant. I know I can't undo what I did. But I want to thank you, for showing me what real strength looks like. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, quietly, she said, You don't owe me gratitude, Jordan. You owe yourself change. He nodded, voice breaking. I'm trying. Rachel smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both closure and grace. I know, she said. And for what it's worth. I'm proud of that. They stood there, silent for a moment, two people bound not by love anymore, but by understanding. Then Rachel turned to leave. Before she did, she paused and said softly. Be the man you should have been when you still had everything. That's how you'll earn it back, not with me, but with yourself. And she walked away, not in anger, but in peace. Epilogue, thread of time narration. The thing about power is that it always reveals who we are, never who we pretend to be. For years, Jordan thought strength meant dominance. But strength isn't found in control, it's found in restraint, in empathy, in the courage to admit when you've been wrong. Rachel didn't win because she took his empire. She won because she refused to lose herself. Every act of disrespect comes with a cost. And every act of grace carries its own kind of justice. Because sometimes, life doesn't shout when it teaches you a lesson. Sometimes, it just hands you a mirror and waits for you to see the truth. And when that truth finally comes, it's never about revenge. It's about redemption. It's about the quiet, unstoppable power of dignity. Final line, narrator's voice softens. She didn't destroy him. She rebuilt herself. And that was the moment he finally understood. He'd never been the one with the power.